Hey guys, welcome back to my channel Sakura Starlight. Today we finally got some new info of Kodaka's creator of Danganronpa new project Master Detective Archives Rain Code, and this new information was released during Nintendo Direct is set to release in spring of 2023 on the Nintendo Switch. This game has also been nicknamed Danganronpa Spiritual Successor because of the art style as well some similar gameplay aspects. This new trailer gives us a lot more info about the story and gameplay, and I am so excited, so let's begin. Welcome to the city of perpetual rain. Many cases remain unsolved in this corporate-controlled metropolis. Those who investigate are called master detectives who come from all around the world. Meet Yuma, an amnesiac detective, and Shinigami, the spirit haunting him after they pact. Dive into these unsolved cases as a trainee at the detective agency. Thoroughly investigate the crime scene to gather evidence. As the investigation progresses, when you're ready, Shinigami will open a realm known as the Mystery Labyrinth, creating a path toward the truth. Once inside the Mystery Labyrinth, the mysteries shrouding the case materialize as gimmicks and traps, lying in wait to consume Yuma. And mystery phantoms will attempt to hinder your progress during each case. Avoid their barrage of falsehoods and slash through their contradictions. The rules of reality don't apply here. Delve into the ever-changing Mystery Labyrinth and get to heart of the case. This game looks like Danganronpa and Persona, and after this trailer I'm honestly so much excited for this game. The Mystery Labyrinth reminds me so much of the palaces from Persona 5. For those of you who aren't familiar with Persona, the palace is like this manifestation of distortion created by the target that they're trying to change the heart. So just looking at it reminds me a lot of that, except in this case a labyrinth is more based off the case and the target's crimes, rather than their corrupt personality. Specifically, I really enjoyed exploring the palaces, specifically in Persona 5. So I'm really excited to see what they do with these Mystery Labyrinth. Another interesting thing about it is that it looks like they adding Danganronpa gameplay, like for example the minecart mini-game looks a lot like Logic Dive, and during boss fights with the phantoms you have to shoot down the contradictions and their arguments, and non-stop debates, and in these boss fights, specifically look like a mix of Danganronpa mechanics, but it's like an RPG fighting game. It looks so cool. To be honest, I really like RPG games. Also, the story is pretty interesting too. Based off the trailer, the corporate control metropolis reminds me of Persona 5. I'm kind of wondering if it's going to have like similar social commentary, and the cases being kinda similar to the targets in Persona 5 in terms of like social status. Like for example, you start out solving the case of somebody totally unknown, but by the end of the game you are solving a murder that like the Prime Minister committed or something like that. Also, I was wondering if the detective agency that you're part of is also connected to these seemingly corrupted corporations, or it's kind of more of its own thing. If it is secretly a corrupt organization, I could see you have been to solve cases relating to the organization's crimes towards the end, and of course, the fact that the protagonist's memories are gone is kinda suspicious. I'm sure there's going to be some kind of twist regarding him. I think he would ends up being a murderer, but he lost his memories of it, or saw or known something that he wasn't supposed to know, so he goes to the Mystery Labyrinth and he is going through regaining his memories. It would be cool if you fight a phantom of himself, and it could either be based off that part of him that's like denying that he actually did something wrong, or you could be fighting your more evil self that you just haven't really come into contact with yet because he lost his memories. Also, looking to characters, the detectives at the agency all look pretty unique. My favorite detective is the girl who drinking tea. Now let's discuss some of the new details that have been released regarding the Danganronpa creator aka Kodaka and newest game Master Detective Archives Rain Code. And honestly, the more information I learn about, the more it really does seem to be the spiritual successor of Danganronpa, and there is a lot of cool stuff in these interviews. So I'm excited to share them with you guys. Also, there's about 5 interviews in total, and all of these came out around the same time that the new trailer was presented during Nintendo Direct. I'm going to look through the information that I think is the most interesting or important in these, but I'm going to organize them by topic rather than by interview, because it can get pretty repetitive going by each interviews as they talk about the same stuff, so I'm going over the stuff that I think is the most interesting. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Firstly, they have really big goals when it comes to this project. Kodaka described it as his largest project in his career. They estimate that Rain Code is going to be about 40 to 50 hours of playtime depending on how much you do with the side quests. And the game is almost fully voice acted, so this number is also assuming that you listen to the voice lines until the end. And also, like Danganronpa, they're planning on creating this game for a much broader audience. This seems to be one of the reasons why they decided to introduce 3D graphics. since Kodaka mentions in another interview that he hopes the 3D graphics will make the game appeal to more people. It's also stated that the scheme will contain Kodaka's dark and raunchy humor that Danganronpa had. Like I said, they wanted to have a broader appeal, and the plot twist will be crazier than ever. And Rain Code is the spiritual successor of Danganronpa. It's said that Rain Code is made for the fans who want more Danganronpa out of the Danganronpa man. New world, new gameplay, new 3D presentation, but the same feel, same pace, same bite and impact, same character direction, and same style of mystery solving. Kodaka mentions an interesting thought about wanting to make the investigation game that defines the decade, the same way Ace Attorney defined the 2000s and Danganronpa defined 2010s. With this in mind, just as Danganronpa evolved Ace Attorney's court battles into action puzzles, they think that Rain Code should go a step further into the dungeon crawling elements, changing visuals, traps, and monsters as you advance deeper into the mystery. So really does feel like the next step in this genre that Kodaka feels he needs to keep spicing it up. So I'm glad to see that his passion for this genre seems to be reignited by adding in these new elements. And I really look forward to seeing how the murders and mysteries take advantage of these new gameplay attributes, as was the graphics, to make even grander mysteries with bigger twists. The main game story is supposed to progress like Danganronpa 2, where there's a long story section, the chapter's case happens, an investigation, and then there is a mystery labyrinth, which replaces the class trials in order to solve the mystery, then the case closes and the next chapter starts. I've also seen that a lot of people are worried about the gameplay for this game because they didn't like the gameplay in World's End Club. But I think it's important to note that Kodaka didn't directly write the scenario or give direction for that game, and that he actually stated in one of these interviews that Rain Code is the first game since Danganronpa where he's doing these, so just going on to clear that up for anybody was concerned about this. He was also asked if there was a new Danganronpa, a game in the works, and he stated that he's asked Spike Chunsoft about it, but they refused to tell him, which is pretty interesting since you think that if there wasn't anything in the works they wouldn't be so secretive about it. About a year ago, Chunsoft did mention on their website that they looked forward to expanding the Danganronpa franchise after Danganronpa S and expanding it with games and various genres. So I feel like it's most likely that they have like another spin-off game in the work like Danganronpa S, but I still do have hope that they potentially doing a clean reboot of the franchise. Moving on, let's discuss the story and the gameplay of Rain Code. The main character is Yuma. He has amnesia, make him start the story more panicky than his usual default state. He remembers he's a trainee detective but doesn't remember why he made a pact with Shinigami. In the interview with Nintendo Life, Kodaka agrees that Yuma is pretty similar to Makoto from Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, or as we know it as Danganronpa 1. Since they made both characters as plain as possible so that players could easily sympathize with them. Yuma memory loss is also meant to help players sympathize with him, since we're finding out events about the game and characters at the same time as he is. The Shinigami take on the role of the investigation partner and the female lead and the silly mascot character like Monokuma into one single character. Basically, Kodaka thought, what if Monokuma was your buddy cop teammate instead of your enemy? As for the Shinigami personality, she is a troublemaker. She spent centuries possessing detectives, and now she claims she'll make a respectable detective out of Yuma. But she doesn't give a damn about human common sense, and Yuma is the doormat suffering from her goofy antics. They decided to make Yuma more weak-willed than any of the Danganronpa protagonists due to the buddy cop format of his game. The protagonist needed to be someone unable to say no to Shinigami's antics, and the Danganronpa protagonists aren't like that. They really want her to shine the most out of the duo. One important thing to note that is the Shinigami Japanese name has a broken okirigana in the middle to dissociate her from the popular idea of a Grim Reaper. She's a special entity, not a standard Reaper. I will take a guess here and assume it seemed like they do this specify that her English name is Shinigami left untranslated for the exact same reason. Even in the game there is a buddy cop team in Yuma and Shinigami. The other master detectives appear to be very integral to the story and solving the cases. There will be a ton of interactions with these characters, and because of that Kodaka states that it shouldn't feel too different from a Danganronpa game, cast size wise. Kodaka confirmed that for some parts of the story Yuma will pair up with the other detectives, and it's mentioned that getting help from the other master detectives will be essential to beating the game. But not all the other detectives will be allies, it's stated that some of them will be enemies. And thanks to their abilities, the investigation sequences in Rain Code will be a lot more varied than Danganronpa's investigations, as which abilities you have at hand change the procedure a lot. The investigation sequences in Rain Code last until the mega corporation that rules the city decides to cover up the case. Once that happens, the truth won't go public no matter how many master detectives find it. I find this idea to be really interesting. I'm assuming that we'll have a different master detective partner for each chapter during the investigations. I really like the idea of there being a chapter where they actually work against you rather than help you. I could see like one instance where they're just very competitive and refuse to work with you because they want to solve it first or on their own. But I wonder if others may be working for the mega corporations that seem to be the main villains of this game, like maybe there's a traitor working for the enemy among the master detectives. I could actually see something like that happening, and everything did note about the other master detectives is that they all have special investigative abilities. Kodaka again compares the master detectives' abilities to Danganronpa's ultimate talents in how they will be utilized throughout the story. He also mentioned that those abilities have been fostered by the organization the master detectives belong to, which is also a familiar plot point. And one example of these special ability is controlling bugs to investigate places you normally couldn't enter. It's also clarified that the abilities are given through training, after joining the organization, and they are not real superpowers. I'm assuming those bugs are like robot bugs or something like that, since it does mention that they aren't superpowers, and I think this makes sense too. If there were like just really tiny drones that you can control it, then you could watch what was going on the other room, but we'll just have to wait and see. Also, the fact that the master detectives exist and have special abilities is public knowledge. They are seen as heroes by the general public. Shinigami, on the other hand, is not known to exist and only visible to Yuma. They mentioned that the master detective's abilities investigation sequences in a Rain Code will be a lot more varied than Danganronpa investigation, since whatever ability you have access to will change the procedure a lot. I'm glad to see they are trying to add things to the investigation parts. The Danganronpa investigations, in my opinion, are the weakest part of the game just because it's such a big info dump and there is barely ever any like story breaks. These special abilities and having the opportunity to learn more about these master detectives, I think it will help make them a lot more enjoyable, although, to be fair, we don't totally know if there is going to be more gameplay stuff out into the investigations. For this game, I hope that there is, but even if there isn't, I'm so looking forward to learning more about the characters during the investigation scenes. The new characters are one of the things I'm looking forward to most with this new project. So I'm really glad that it seems like there's going to be some time for them to all shine during the main story. It's mentioned during the interviews that there will be side quests that exist to let you know these master detectives better. Exactly like Danganronpa's free time events, and also like free time events, they are entirely optional. Kodaka mentioned at one point that he enjoys writing characters who have their own main story. Basically decides to flush them out, the point that they could be the protagonist of their own story. And that's something I really liked, so I'm glad it seems like he's going in the same direction with these characters, and I'm really glad there's going to be optional stories where we can see. He also mentions that everyone just so happens to die in stories, which is ominous. I feel like the other detectives are not safe at all based off of this. I'm really curious if some of them are going to end up being a culprit or a victim in these cases, but we will see. I just thought that line was super interesting. Kodaka said there will be no mini-games, but there will be a lot of side quests in two types. One is helping people in need as you find them in the city, and the other is the aforementioned side quests to interact with master detectives. Next, I want to talk about some of the details regarding the labyrinth. The investigation sequences in Rain Code will last until the mega corporation that rules the city decides to cover up the case. Once that happens, the truth won't go public no matter how many master detectives find it. So Yuma has to utilize Shinigami unique power and clear the mystery labyrinth so that the case can be brought to light. The power used within the labyrinth affects the real world, causing the crime to be clarified before it's covered up. The creatures inside the labyrinth represent the corporation members that are trying to cover up the crime and not the actual culprits. And the cities in Rain Code universe size is bigger than Tokyo, but not by much. The first main boss at the game appears to be this gangster-looking guy that was shown during Nintendo Direct trailer, since it looks pretty similar to the monster that Yuma is battling in the dungeon. Though this whole setup really does remind me a lot of Persona 5, like you enter this other world labyrinth. Then once you completed the mission, the real world just like naturally changes because of it. I wonder if it's going to be similar to the change of heart in Persona 5, where the culprit just like admits to their crimes. But since the labyrinth seems to reflect that cover-up, rather than the culprits of conscience, it may be that the person who's covering it up admits to their crimes. I could also see it that being that slowly over time the cover-up fails as well. It's something where quick and drastic, like the change of hearts in Persona 5, just because I love those scenes so much. There is like another interesting thing to note about the labyrinth is that time is supposed to stop while Yuma is inside. Unless he solved the mystery, he is stuck in there for life. This being something that happens towards the end game. Like maybe he fails to solve a mystery to get stuck in there and the climax is us like trying to get out, but that's just kind of quick thought that I had. Kodaka also mentioned that the game will have its decent share of lore to explore and theorize about, but it will be completely optional to the game's progression. Also, he assured the difficulty of the action parts won't be an obstacle either. These two things are promised to be a lot like Danganronpa, and he made some comments about these choices for the mystery labyrinth. These are places where you solve mysteries, and as you get closer to the truth, the scenery and the setting will also change. In the mystery labyrinth, the real-world rules don't apply. So there's going to be a lot of things that can happen, like when you solve the mystery, the whole thing could change, so you can see the different environments. He mentioned that fans can expect it to be a mixture of Alice in Wonderland and like Danganronpa as well as their style. Also, the weapon that we see Yuma use in the mystery labyrinth is a saber. Kodaka mentioned that they decided not to use a gun or bullet motive, since they already used in Danganronpa. Now I want to talk a little bit about the world and the city that's the story going to be taking place in. They decided that the city is not a place that takes place in the real world, they wanted it to be its own unique place. In size is it supposed to be bigger than Tokyo, but not by too much. As for the design, he mentions being inspired by London as well some other Asian cities. It is set in the same present time as though taking place in the 2020s. I feel like this could reflect the fact that they want it to be the mystery game that defines the 2020s. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, and although there are some very advanced looking technology like the drone umbrellas, that's meant to show the advancements that were made because of the location and not because it's in the future. Like the only reason that they don't exist now in the real world is because there's no real place that has enough rain to make them and it's not necessary. He also feels that futuristic murder mysteries aren't very viable, because you have to consider technological revolutions. The rain in the city is apparently supposed to be pretty important to the plot too, but the reason for its importance was never further elaborated. The game is also described as a lucid noir adventure game. Part of the reason is because the lights within the city, specifically the neon lights, are a big element used in the game's world building and atmosphere. The other reason is because it's a new type detective story with the main character who has amnesia and thus is not completely lucid. Kodaka actually mentions several times in these interviews that one of the biggest differences between this game and Danganronpa is the fact that it has 3D graphics. One of the interviewers asked if there was any new murder tricks enabled by the 3D environment, and Kodaka says that it's the opposite. A lot of things that were acceptable in Danganronpa due to the wonky 2D perspective wouldn't work in 3D, making the cases a lot harder to make. They also talk a little bit about the music for this game that Kodaka gave Takada his playlist of tracks from detective shows and movies soundtracks to use as reference material, and requested to avoid making Rain Code soundtracks too similar to Danganronpa's. The soundtrack is low on its number of tracks, but the tracks have many alternative versions. And then finally they mentions of future updates to look forward to while we wait on the game release, and there will be future updates about revealing character profiles, voice actors and gameplay details one by one. I'm really excited to see how they try to improve upon Danganronpa, like mysteries and stuff. So I'm super excited for this game. Let me know what you guys think. Are you excited? What do you think about these new updates? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this video, and have a nice day and night. Bye.